So something that occurred to me is I'm struggling to just to read aloud without getting too many interruptions, the introductory chapter to this book. And I'm realizing why now it's so difficult for me is that had I approached this book first amongst the series, the 55 book series on violence, mimesis, and culture, of which this is one of the first ones actually. This is one of the ones before they figured out how to make the edges better. The quality of the book is much better after like the first 5 or 6 of them. But stay on topic. I don't think I would have gotten as much out of this book if I had read this first as I am getting out of it now, and I'm still not done with it. But I woke up, and that's the thing. I went to the last 2 chapters and the conclusion, and now I'm still only 105 pages into it, and I'm realizing, you know, a lot of this is so granular that it's not for public consumption. I mean, it goes back to the whole thing about what is my real purpose is I'm the guy that can understand these books and then sing the song, the themes, the rhythms of the book, so that way others can understand it. To be able to say, okay, what's the real point behind this book? How does that link to the rest of the mimetic theory? How does it link to Christianity, the anthropological vision that Girard provides us to see Christianity, and what all the significance and meaning and hidden depth of Christianity is just now being revealed to us. It's taken us 2,000 years to understand at this level, and there's so much more work that needs to be done. That's the one thing that's so interesting about all of the mimeticists. It seems that they understand that we are really only standing at the threshold of a whole new era, an era that I believe, boy, I want to immediately take my mimetic spectacles and turn my gaze on Philip Reef's work and his three world concept. That first world was founded very similar to, I think it overlays perfectly with Girard's concept of archaic religion. It had taboos. It was prohibitive in order so that man could get along with his fellows. And then Christianity comes along, and it has its own laws, its commandments, but it also has its models, its role models, and this capacity for forgiveness that enables us to get along even better and flourish even more. And here we are 2,000 years later, and we now have a Rosetta Stone that can show us that no, all violence is never the answer. War is absolutely unjustifiable, and those are some concepts that flip. I mean, this is the thing that's interesting about it from a conservative Christian point of view, a Reaganite point of view, which believes that you have to have peace through strength and that weakness invites aggression. It would seem then that the statements that I just made completely contradict it. Hey, Liebchen. Guten Tag. So I was actually filming an episode right now. I realize my hair looks terrible, but so now I'm going to just roll it.
Fine.
No, that's cool. So we're out in the garden here, and you are. Hey, that's where the guy sells the paintings, right?
Yeah. I'll move around in this section when you're ready.
Yeah. No, I'm used to seeing a Christ Kindle marked there.
Yeah, that's the best. It's pretty wet today. I'm moving it. Can you see everything?
Yep,
okay?
it's great.
Trying to hold my umbrella out of the way. And then this is pretty, this fountain here. Yesterday, or Saturday, they had people singing in front of it. It was really nice.
Who is that the Mozart fountain, or a Mozart statue?
No,
that's the one in the middle of the square. Yeah, that's, yeah.
Yeah, Trino. I don't know what that is. So there's the other cut through. Of course, they still have all the, and then here comes the beautiful
Dome.
Yeah, amazing. Oh, the birds sound nice there. Here we go. I'll move to the front. 1628. Oh, 774. Look at that on the front of the doors. 774 through 1620, 1959.
Yeah, and that's where they set up the choir right there.
Yeah, it's pretty, really nice, huh?
Yep.
Looks nice.
Did you get any Lebkuchen yet?
See it.
Did you get any Lebkuchen yet, babe?
Nope, that's not my favorite. I did have a apricot, kind of like a dessert, ein Stuckel, Marilyn, cake, and then I had a few things after dinner. We split a dessert between the three of us on the days, but that's what I had so far. Not a lot. I haven't done a lot of pizzas because that was something I knew I'd like when I was in Germany and stuff. So, yeah. Good.
Yeah, and if, on your next assignment, the food will be good too because you're going to Hamburg.
Yeah, lots of hamburgers.
Yeah, is there a schnitzel? Is there a schnitzel Austria anywhere? That'd be a good assignment for you.
Yeah, that'd be perfect. No, I had schnitzel in Germany, so that was good. And then I had margarita pizza, right? Very simple, but everything tastes so good and so fresh. So, okay, good. I'm going to go up there.
All right.
I'm going to move to the next place. Do you want me to call you from there?
Sure.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Tschüss. I was just talking Austrian economics the other day, and I got to tour Hayek's private library in the cellar of the University of Salzburg, right there in just, it's two blocks over. It's just a little walk down the Getreide Gasse, and you make a left there, and you go down to the basement, and it's in there. I got a video of it. So, where was I? I was talking about how, my purpose is really to kind of, to read these books, and, to read a book only one time is to not really know it. And to know it is different than to be able to, to read it is different than to learn it. And to learn it is different than to be able to teach it. And then, what's the real purpose? Am I trying to teach it, or am I trying to integrate it into, my larger system? And of course the answer is yes, both. And that's the thing, is that I realize now in the subsequent 100 pages that there is a lot to this book, and each chapter has its own song, if I'm going to use that language. And that's the other thing, is that this mimetic theory in general has its own language to which someone needs to assent in order to be able to do it. You've got to know, the contours, the mechanisms, the springs, the levers and triggers that function. Again, I always say it's like looking at not the face of the clock, but seeing it from the other side, seeing all of the levers and gears that cause the clock to function. And once you're able to see that, you can do more than tell the time. You can tell that time's running out, and that we are in apocalyptic mode at this point. And doesn't mean that's going to be arriving, and that's the whole point. And this is where I think that it will be very interesting to know what the Vugulans think of mimetic theory, because I think they blend very well. Both these guys are tremendous Catholics, and both of them see that we should not try to eminentize the eschaton. That's kind of the whole point, is to not bring the apocalypse to now. And the only way to escape mimesis is to understand its functioning, and to understand that it's the whole point of Christ, is that we no more sacrifices. We no longer need to make sacrifices. In fact, we can't, because he lays bare the utter futility of violence. Violence doesn't settle things. It produces and imposes a kind of peace, but it breeds resentment, and that's the whole Hatfield and McCoy escalation and extremes. When you understand the world through this bipolar duel that is inevitable until the world embraces the idea of nonviolence and the idea of loving one's neighbor, that if we are rising to in this rivalrous acquisitiveness, this demonic desire that pushes us ever forward to, to one up the other person, or to covet what he owns, or to divest him of his power, or to invalidate his authority, or just his specialty, or whatever makes him different. Once you invalidate all that stuff, then everybody's undifferentiated, and that's where the duels really take place. It doesn't take place between it takes place between essentially similar levels of duelists. So many tangents, but it's like, certainly what I need to do is just get the big board out and write down all the themes, do the Jacques Barzin approach to it, and go, Darrin, what are the themes? I've started doing it. I'm doing it with green highlighter, but yeah. So before the battery runs out, let me see if I can get this first introductory chapter in. This is a peculiar kind of book. It claims to be a study of Germany and French-German relations over the last 2 centuries. At the same time, it says things that have never before been said with the violence and clarity that they require. Its subject is the possibility of an end to Europe, the Western world, and the world as a whole. Today, this possibility has become real. This is an apocalyptic book. Until now, my entire work has been presented as a discussion of archaic religion through comparative anthropology. He basically makes the point that all religions prior to Christianity are mythical, and here comes my neighbor cat just as I'm sitting here talking. And Christianity has a mythical structure, but the difference is, the way we should look at them is not how they are similar, but what is the difference, because the difference makes all of the difference. And the difference is that Christianity, you can do this comparative anthropological comparative religion, that would be the neighbor cat rubbing himself on the tripod. The key point to understand is that Christianity is, unlike all myths, the victim is innocent and violence is futile. And in fact, Christianity reveals the veil that violence founds peace. See, I'm already getting tangled in my argument here. This is an apocalyptic book. Until now, my entire work has been presented as a discussion of archaic religion through comparative anthropology. Its goal was to shed light on what is known as the process of homonization, the fascinating passage from animality to humanity that occurred 2,000s of years ago. My hypothesis is mimetic. Because humans imitate one another more than animals do, they have had to find a means of dealing with contagious similarity. This contagious similarity which could lead to the pure and simple disappearance of their society. The mechanism that reintroduces difference into a situation in which everyone has come to resemble everyone else is sacrifice. Humanity results from sacrifice, and we are thus the children of religion. We are all thus the children of religion. What I call after Freud the founding murder, in other words, the immolation of a sacrificial victim that is both guilty of disorder and able to restore order, is constantly reenacted in rituals at the origin of our institutions. There's a founding murder that takes place in the space after that founding murder, that quiet space, when people are looking to veil from themselves that they've committed this, this unity of murder. Someone threw the first stone, everybody followed. The victim is sacrificed, the scapegoat, and in that moment after that, there's this quiet space in which the law can be laid down. The victim is, and then the victim is kind of divinized, and through the laws, ritual is then established, which reenacts, in a way, this kind of reminder, of these prohibitions. This is one shedding cat. I've never seen a cat that has this much fur. This thing. Hey, Bobo. He wants his snacks. I know, buddy. Since the dawn of humanity, millions of innocent victims have been killed in this way in order to enable their fellow humans to live together, or at least not to destroy one another. This is the implacable logic of the sacred, which myths dissimulate less and less as humans become increasingly self-aware. In other words, as we become more aware of actually this founding mechanism, this founding murder, the victim mechanism of mimesis that takes place when the escalation to extremes takes place, when this growing similarity reaches a crisis point, and eventually the society is engulfed, and there's someone is scapegoated, someone or some people are scapegoated, and myths dissimulate, they conceal this less and less as humans become increasingly self-aware that of the murder in our hearts. This is the whole experience that Peter goes through as the cock crows 3 times. The decisive point in this evolution is the Christian revelation, a kind of divine expiation in which God, through his Son, could be seen as asking for forgiveness from humans for having revealed the mechanism of their violence so late. Ritual had slowly educated them, but from then on, humans had to do without sacrifice. Christianity demystifies religion. Demystification, which is good in the absolute, has proven bad in the relative, for we are not prepared to shoulder its consequences. We are not Christian enough. This paradox can be put in a different way. Christianity is the only religion that has foreseen its own failure. This prescience is known as the apocalypse. Indeed, it is in the apocalypse, the apocalyptic texts, that the word of God is most forceful, repudiating mistakes that are entirely the fault of humans, who are less and less inclined to acknowledge the mechanisms of their violence. The longer we persist in our error, the stronger God's voice will emerge from the devastation. This is why no one wants to read the apocalyptic texts that abound in the synoptic gospels and in the Pauline epistles. This is also why no one wants to recognize that these texts rise up before us, because we have disregarded revelation. Once in our history, the truth about the identity of all humans was spoken, and no one wanted to hear it. Instead, we hang ever more frantically onto our false differences. 2 world wars, the invention of the atomic bomb, several genocides, and an imminent ecological disaster have not sufficed to convince humanity, and Christians above all, that the apocalyptic texts might not be predictions, but certainly do concern the disaster that is underway. What needs to be done to get them a hearing? I've been accused of repeating myself too often, of turning my theory into a fetish, of using it to explain everything. Yet, it has described the mechanisms that recent discoveries in neuroscience confirm. Imitation is the initial and essential means of learning. It is not something acquired later on. We can escape mimeticism only by understanding the laws that govern it. Only by the dangers of imitation can we conceive of an authentic identification with the other. However, we are becoming aware of the primacy of moral relationship at the very time when the atomization of humanity is being realized, when the violence has increased in intensity and unpredictability. Hey, Bubba. Today, violence has been unleashed. Yeah, this is so interesting because Romano Guardini discusses this as the possible postmodern condition. And so I wonder if he's read Romano Guardini. Yeah. The only way to escape the laws of Mimeticism is to kind of have a metanoia, and you can have this awakening of the soul, so that way you can kind of see everything from the other side of the clock. That awakened is constantly coming into play there. So today, violence has been unleashed across the world, creating what the apocalyptic text predicted: confusion between disasters caused by nature and those caused by humans, between natural and the man-made. Global warming, rising waters are no longer metaphors today. Yeah, no, there's no rising water. Sorry, you're just wrong about that. Violence, although there would certainly be a tremendous ecological disaster if we had nuclear war. Violence, which produced the sacred, no longer produces anything but itself. Wow. I am not the one repeating myself. Reality is beginning to resemble a truth that was not invented since it was described 2,000 years ago. The fact that reality now confirms this truth is what our unhealthy obsession with contradiction and innovation neither can nor wants to understand. The paradox is that by always getting closer to alpha, we are always going towards omega. The paradox is that by always getting closer to alpha, we are always going toward omega. That by better understanding the origin, we can see every detail a little better, that the origin is coming closer. The fetters put in place by the founding murderer, but unshackled by the passion, are now liberating planet-wide violence. And we cannot refasten these bindings because we now know that scapegoats are innocent. The passion unveiled the sacrificial origin of humanity once and for all. It dismantled the sacred and revealed its violence. However, Christ also confirmed the divine that is within all religions. The incredible paradox, which no one can accept, is that the passion has freed violence at the same time as it has freed holiness. The sacred, which has been returning for 2,000 years, is thus not an archaic form of the sacred, but a sacred that has been satanized by the awareness we have of it. And that indicates that through its very excesses, the imminence of the second coming. Thus, what we are seeking to describe is occurring at the beginning applies increasingly to events in progress. This more and more is the law of relations amongst us as violence grows in the world. This time, at the risk of destroying it, Heraclitus wrote that polemos, war, is the father of all and the king of all. And this will be a constant theme, is that, when men take up the god of war, and, are they becoming heroes? The hero is always just a little outdated when when we become aware of him as a role model, and otherwise he's dangerous. And now in the new era following on Clausewitz, the danger is, these are new dangers, and particularly because now we have the capacity of destroying ourselves, as Europe did in the 20th century, and we certainly could now with the nuclear holocaust. So this law of human relations was reformulated in office of the Berlin Military Academy a few years after Napoleon's fall. The reformulation took the shape of the trend to extremes, the inability of politics to contain reciprocal, in other words, mimetic, increase of the violence. Its author, Karl von Clausewitz, 1780, born 1780, died 1831, was working on a book that he left unfinished when he died. It was perhaps the greatest book ever written on war, a treatise that the English, Germans, French, Italians, Russians, and Chinese have read and reread from the end of the 19th century until the present day. Clausewitz's posthumous treatise on war claims to be a work on strategy. It discusses, does a lot of disguising too, primarily from its author, the things of which he was getting some almost a providential glimpse of through his resentment, which is really the scariest part of it all. It discusses what was at the time the most recent example of the trend to extremes, which had occurred, as always, unbeknownst to those involved. Now, the veiling mechanism here, you always watch for the veils. Watch it, how much of this stuff has been veiled from us until now. And that's the reason why his 1978 book is so amazing. It's things hidden since the foundation of time. And it comes out in 1978, so it's such an arbitrary date seemingly, but yet it's been hidden. All these things are hidden. So in the margins, wherever I find it's discussed, I put the little V on top of a V, so that way I know I'm talking about the veiling mechanism. So all these little mechanisms that I'm talking about behind the clock, the springs, the levers, the triggers, the gears. They all have little symbols now that are in the margins of these books. And, just the idea of having an intern someday going in and say, anywhere you see this, put it in that folder. And at some point that book will write itself. Just put it in order and stitch it together. And you have concentrated wisdom of the ages. And anyhow. It claims to be a work on strategy. It discusses what was at the time the most recent example of the trend to extremes, which had occurred, as always, unbeknownst to those involved. The trend then destroyed Europe, and it now threatens to destroy the world. Clausewitz spoke to us about his speciality as if it were not related to everything else that is going on around us, when in fact it has huge implications far beyond his discourse. He reformulated and helped to identify what might be called Prussianism in its most disturbing form, but without considering the consequences of the trend to extremes, which did not frighten him enough. Clausewitz's thought applies to French-German relations as a whole, from Prussia's defeat in 1806 to France's collapse in 1940. His book was written for the period when European wars escalated mimetically until they resulted in disaster. It would thus be perfectly hypocritical to see On War as only a technical book. What happens when we reach the extremes that Clausewitz glimpses before hiding them behind strategic considerations? Okay. What happens when we reach the extremes that Clausewitz glimpses before he hides them behind strategic considerations? He does not tell us. This is the question we have to ask today. Let us dare to say that we, the French and Germans, are responsible for the devastation that is underway because our extremes have become the whole world. We set the spark to the tinder. If we had been told 30 years ago that Islamism would replace the Cold War, we would have been laughed at. If we had said 30 years ago that the military and environmental events were foretold in the gospel, or that the apocalypse began in Verdun, people would have taken us for Jehovah's Witnesses. Yet war has been the only engine of technological progress. That's a stretch. I would say capitalism in many ways has had a bigger hand in it. Its disappearance as an institution, war as an institution, has disappeared because of the new era that Clausewitz is going to introduce us to. And so, war has been the only engine of technological process. Its disappearance as an institution, which goes hand in hand with conscription and total mobilization, has drenched the world in blood and fire. By continuing to not want to see, we are encouraging the escalation towards the worst. Clausewitz had a stunning intuition about history's sudden accelerated course, but he immediately disguised it and tried to give his book the tone of a technical scholarly treatise. We therefore have to complete Clausewitz by taking up the route that he interrupted and following it right to its end. For this, we have gone to the text that no one seems to read, that of Clausewitz first and then the apocalyptic texts. Through the former, the relevance of the latter becomes apparent with greater force. We shall not turn to the author of war. We shall not turn the author of On War into a scapegoat, as did in their time Stalin and Liddell Hart, one of his most famous commentators. We shall also not be content with the timidity with which Raymond Aron tried to rehabilitate him. The reason the text is not fully understood is perhaps because it has been attacked and defended too often. It is as if we have not yet wanted to understand the central intuition that it seeks to hide. This constant denial is interesting. Clausewitz was possessed, like all the great writers, of resentment. It was because he wanted to be more rational than the strategists who preceded him that he suddenly put his finger on this aspect of reality that is absolutely irrational. Then, once he discovered it, he retreated and tried to shut his eyes to it. Completing the interpretation of On War is to say that its meaning is religious, and that only a religious interpretation has a chance of reaching what is essential in it. Clausewitz conceives relations among men as mimetic, in spite of the fact his philosophical approach was that of Enlightenment rationalism. Oh boy, hooray, more of that. He provided all of the means for showing that the world is tending more and more to extremes, and yet his imagination is always thwarted and limited by his intuitions. No, excuse me. His imagination always thwarted and limited his, very profound and deep intuition. Clausewitz and his commentators were hampered by their rationalism. This is as good a proof as any that a different kind of rationality is needed to understand the reality of what he glimpsed. Ours is the first society that knows it can completely destroy itself, yet we lack the belief that could bear up under this knowledge. So we don't really approach the war, which must not happen, properly. We're still doing it in kind of this old archaic religion form, even Clausewitz himself. It is not theologians who set us on the track of a new It is not the theologians who set us on the track of the new rationality. That was done by an armchair strategist who died at the age of 51 from the misunderstanding surrounding his work. He was a military theorist from France, England, and the who died at the age of 51 from the misunderstanding surrounding his work. He was a military theorist from whom, start this over. He was a military, sometimes my highlighting confuses me, but he was a military theorist whom France, England, and the Soviet Union detested. A feisty writer who left no one indifferent. These theses themselves have no future, yet there is a subcurrent running beneath them that needs to be read aloud, for it can reveal a hidden reality. However imperfect, we find certain formulations in it. So, durch diese Werkselbstwirkung wieder das Streben nach dem Äußersten. By this reciprocal action, the movement towards the outside shadows, unquote. Without realizing it, Clausewitz discovered not only the apocalyptic formula. Without realizing it, Clausewitz discovered not only the apocalyptic formula, but also the fact that it is bound up with mimetic rivalry. Where can this truth be understood in a world that continues to close its eyes to the incalculable consequences of mimetic rivalry? Not only was Clausewitz right in opposition to Hegel and all modern wisdom, but he was right about the terrible implications for humanity. This warmonger alone saw certain things. To him, to turn him into a devil would be to slumber on a volcano. Civilization, I'll remind you, is merely a thin crust over the volcano. Enter Holderlin. Like Holderlin, I think that Christ alone allows us to face this reality without sinking into madness. The apocalypse does not announce the end of the world, it creates hope. If we suddenly see reality, we do not experience the absolute despair of an unthinking modernity, but we rediscover a world in which things have meaning. Hope is possible only if we dare to think about the danger at hand. But this requires opposing both nihilists, for whom everything is only a language, and the realists, who reject the idea that intelligence can attain truth. Heads of state, bankers, soldiers, who claim to be saving us when in fact they are plunging us deeper into devastation every day. War ain't the answer. By accepting crucifixion, and this will be a major theme in all the Mises, is the consenting scapegoat. By accepting crucifixion, Christ brought to light what had been hidden since the foundation of the world. In other words, the foundation itself. The unanimous murder that appeared in broad daylight for the first time on the cross. In order to function, archaic religions need to hide their founding murder, which was being repeated continuously in ritual sacrifices, thereby protecting human societies from their own violence. The violent ritual sacrifice of scapegoats enabled them to not see their own violence and then have the cohesiveness to get along with their fellows, enough to scare the crap out of them. And by Christ, by revealing the founding murder, Christianity has thereby destroyed the ignorance and the superstition that are indispensable to such archaic religions. It thus made possible an advance in knowledge that was, until then, unimaginable. Freed of sacrificial constraints, the human mind invented science, technology, and all of the best and worst of culture. Our civilization is the most creative and powerful ever known, but it's also the most fragile and threatened because it no longer has the safety rails of archaic religion, which Christ has revealed. Without sacrifice, in the broad sense, it could destroy itself if it does not take care, which clearly it is not doing. Was Paul a megalomaniac when he said that the first epistle to the Corinthians, none of the rulers of this age understood this, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory? I don't think so. The rulers of this age and all that Paul calls the powers and principalities were state structures based on the founding murder. So that whole thing gets turned on its head now, doesn't it? I'll never read Paul the same way. Okay, so the rulers of this age and all that Paul calls powers and principalities were state structures based on the founding murder, which was effective because it was hidden. In the context, the leading power was the Roman Empire, which was essentially Hey there.
Hi. Sorry, I got a little sidetracked.
Well, you're about 100 yards from where you were last time you called.
No, I looked in the Heimat, Salzburger Heimat, where they make the Durgel stuff.
Ah, is that good?
Check that out. Very pretty. So I was going to take around this area. You want to take a look?
Yeah. Here, I'll get this on camera then too.
Oh, okay. Tell me when you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Oh, okay. Good. Yeah. So I had to mail some postcards. You should be getting one in about probably 2 to 3 weeks.
Ah, vielen Dank,
You know
meine
how these
Liebchen.
things go. Very slow. There's that pretty fountain here.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
now we're getting into some of the shops and things in that area. And
Oh, yeah.
they're renovating the Salzburg Museum. Let me go see.
Oh, nice. Is that the Mozart statue there?
Yeah, I'm going over there now.
Yeah, I see him now. All right.
Yeah, they have the.
Oh my gosh, I forgot the name of the restaurant that has that. Right there on the...
Broken steel.
No, the one that's right on the end of the Getreidagasse.
Oh.
Kind of where the Goldstrasse and the Getreidagasse, or it's called the Goldgasse, Wasserstrasse, right?
Yeah, a good try to got some gold got you. That's
Yeah.
oops, somebody's behind me. Oops. I don't know why they're driving around here. Yeah, so this is one of the little cafes.
Yeah. Which one is that? What's the name of that cafe there?
One of them's Tomaselli.
Tomaselli, Cafe Tomaselli. Reeks.
Yeah, but this has a different name on it now. I don't know.
No, that happens. By the way, your finger's over the camera.
Oh, sorry. That
That's all right.
doesn't help, does it? It's like something my dad would do. And then here, yeah, you're right. Here's the Mozart statue.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Salzburg Museum. I'm not doing any of those kind of things because I've already seen them in limited time. But the only thing I really went through on it, I had to pay to get in to see the castle panoramic view. But that was okay. That was worth it. So, yeah. Pretty nice. Huh?
All right, babe.
Hasn't changed much, has it?
You've already gone to Mirabel, though, right?
Yeah, I did that Saturday. I'm glad because I knew that was going to be sunny weather.
Yeah,
so
did it stop raining? It looks like, though.
Just not long ago, thankfully.
Yep.
So it's good. So
all right.
It's really pretty now.
All right, next time you got something new to show me, give me a call.
Okay, well.
All right, babe.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Love you.
Cheers.
Cheers. And so we're back to Christ. By consenting to be the scapegoat, he destroyed the ignorance and superstition that are indispensable to archaic religions. In other words, Christianity is a brand new, unlike all the previous religions, because it exposes the lie that the victims, the scapegoats, are guilty. And this is made possible an advance in knowledge that was then, until then, unimaginable. Freed of sacrificial restraints, the human mind embedded in science, technology, and all the best and worst of culture, our civilization is the most creative and powerful ever known, but also the most fragile and threatened because it no longer has the safety rails of archaic religion. Without sacrifice in the broad sense, it could destroy itself if it does not care, which clearly it is not doing. Was Paul a megalomaniac when he said that in the first epistle to the Corinthians that none of the rulers of this age understood this, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory? I don't think so. The rulers of this age and all that Paul calls powers and principalities were the state structures based on the founding murder, which was effective because hidden. In the context, the leading power was the Roman Empire, which was essentially evil in the absolute but indispensable in the relative, and better than total destruction, about which the Christian revelation warns us. Once again, this does not mean Christian revelation is bad. Christian revelation is bad. It is wholly good, but we are unable to come to terms with it. A scapegoat remains effective as long as we believe in its guilt. Having a scapegoat means, and I think one of the things that may be one of the biggest blind spots in mimesis is that, what happens when the person that is being scapegoated is the just punishment for someone who is truly guilty. And that's the whole point of justice, is to make sure that the mass isn't lynching, that there's a due process for all of that. But then over and above this, I think that the transcending truth that is being revealed here is that even with them, although there deserves punishment, still and he becomes our enemy thereby because he's an enemy to society. There's a point to the whole the idea of his redemption, his rehabilitation, and not murdering that person, not making them a scapegoat, but allowing them instead to have better role models. I'm off on another tangent. Where have you been? I see you were in the lanai. Were you laying on the bed in there? You lay here, fat cat. All right, buddy. Oh. So, the scapegoat remains effective so long as we believe in its guilt. Having a scapegoat means not knowing that we have one. Learning that we have a scapegoat is to lose it forever and to expose ourselves to mimetic conflicts with no possible resolution. This is the implacable law of the escalation to the extremes. The protective system of a scapegoat is finally destroyed by the crucifixion narratives as they reveal Jesus' innocence, and little by little, that of all analogous victims. The process of education away from the violent sacrifice is thus underway, but it is going very slowly, making advances that are almost always unconscious. It is only today that it has had increasingly remarkable results in terms of our comfort, but has also proved ever more dangerous for the future of life on Earth. To make the revolution, yeah, so got the black crow squawking all over my head here. Yeah, the black cat. All I need to do is break a mirror now, right? To make revelation wholly good and not threatening at all, humans have only to adopt the behavior recommended by Christ. Abstain completely from retaliation and renounce the escalation to extremes. Indeed, if the escalation to extreme continues a little longer, it will lead straight to the extinction of all life on the planet. This is the possibility that Raymond Aron glimpsed when reading Clausewitz. He then wrote an impressive work to expel apocalyptic logic from his mind and persuade himself at all costs that the worst could be avoided, that deterrence would always triumph. This budding religious clairvoyance is infinitely superior to what most people are capable of, but insufficient. We have to take the interpretation of the text further. The interpretation needs to be finished. Since the beginning of the novelistic conversion in Deceit, Desire, and the Novel, all of his books, the book that he's talking about here is his book, Deceit, Desire, and the Novel. Since the beginning of the novelistic conversion, he took this huge conversion at the end of his book when he realized it all came to him at once. The mimetic theory, the founding elements of it, the main components of it, came to him all at once in this novelistic conversion as he was writing the end of Deceit, Desire, and the Novel. All of my books since then have been more or less an explicit apology of Christianity. I would like this one to be even more explicit. What we are saying will become more understandable with time because unquestionably we are accelerating swiftly toward the destruction of the world. Christianity is a founding murder in reverse, which illuminates what has to remain hidden to produce ritual sacrificial religions. Paul compared it to food for adults, in contrast with food for children, which is what archaic religions were. Nietzsche himself sometimes had intuitions of this kind regarding the Greeks' infantile character. However, to make the situation even more perverse, Christian revelation is the paradoxical victim of the knowledge that it provides. Absurdly, it is conflated with myth, which it clearly is not, and doubly misunderstood both by its enemies and its partisans, who tend to confuse it with one of the archaic religions that it demystifies. Yet, all demystification comes from Christianity. Even better, the only true religion is the one that demystifies archaic religion. Christ came to take the victim's place. He placed himself at the heart of the system to reveal its hidden workings. The second Adam, to use St. Paul's expression, revealed to us how the first came to be. The Passion teaches us that humanity results from sacrifice, is born with religion. Only religion has been able to contain the conflicts that would have otherwise destroyed the first group of humans. However, the revelation has not destroyed religion. Mimetic theory does not seek to demonstrate that myth is null, but to shed light on the fundamental discontinuity and the continuity between the Passion and archaic religion. Christ's divinity, which precedes the crucifixion, introduces a radical rupture with the archaic. But Christ's resurrection is not complete continuity with all forms of religion that preceded. The way out of archaic religion comes at this price. A good theory about humanity must be based on a good theory about God. Indeed, what do people enthralled to the sacrificial mechanism confusedly think, if not that, he who organizes the thing, namely the lynching of the victim, is living? For, after having set all against all, he reconciles everyone. He is resuscitated because they are not dead. People in the process of being educated who are not yet fully human can become so only by measuring themselves against the divine. And there comes a time when God can reveal himself fully to them. It is understandable that Christ frightened the apostles. However, he is the only model, the one that places man at just the right distance from the divine. Christ came to reveal that his kingdom was not of this world, but that humans, once they have understood the mechanisms of their own violence, can have an accurate intuition of what is beyond it. We can all participate in the divinity of Christ so long as we renounce our own violence. However, we now know, in part thanks to Clausewitz, that humans will not renounce it. The paradox is thus that we are starting to grasp the gospel message at the very moment when the escalation to extremes is becoming the unique law of history. Christian revelation has confirmed all religions in its relation to the divine that is rejected by the modern world. It confirms what religions have glimpsed. In a way, it is because Christ accepted the mold of false resurrections that he has truly risen. The beneficiaries of archaic resurrections that reestablish peace and order were in a real relation to the divine. There was something Christian in all myths. However, by revealing the victim's innocence, the Passion makes positive what was still negative in myths. We now know that the victims were never guilty. Satan thus becomes the name of a sacred that is revealed and utterly devalued through Christ's intervention. This is why Vatican II accomplished a decisive action. It eliminated God's violence, but not the reality of evil. At present, the wise and discerning, which I suppose refers to the academicians, are furiously redoubling their attacks on Christianity, and once again congratulating themselves on its forthcoming demise. Once again, they've been doing this over and over and over again. These unfortunates do not see that their skepticism is itself a byproduct of Christianity, of the Christian religion. While it is good to get rid of the sacrificial idiocies of the past in order to accelerate progress, eliminating obstacles to humanity's forward march and facilitating the invention and production of what will make our lives more prosperous and comfortable, at least in the West, it is nonetheless true that the sacrificial stupidity was also what prevented us from perfecting the ways of killing one another. Paradoxically, stupid sacrifice is what we are most in need of at the present. Enter Blutowski. The only Christians who still talk about the apocalypse are fundamentalists, but they have a completely mythological conception of it. They think that the violence at the end of time will come from God himself. They cannot do without a cruel God. Strangely, they do not see that the violence we ourselves are in the process of amassing and that it is looming over our own heads is entirely sufficient to trigger the worst. They have no sense of humor. This book is based on long discussions with Benoit Chantre and has been entirely reworked and rewritten by him. We established the definitive version together. We follow Clausewitz's text very closely. Conversation's blessings include surprises and new connections. Little by little, we came to see that various authors, poets, and exceptional people were crucial to our discussion. A whole constellation of writers and thinkers finally merged with our thinking. I consider this a little like the communion of saints. The enormous problems that we have raised based on a single text have highlighted these people, and the central thinker has seemed to us to be the poet Darrin. He was an exact contemporary of Clausewitz and Hegel, and undeniably saw that at the heart of the European conflicts, the world's future depended on the face-off between the passion and archaic religion, between Christ and the Greeks. This apocalyptic moment thus serves as a link between a specific theme in Clausewitz's treatise and considerations on the destiny of Europe. We use analytical tools borrowed from anthropology, history, literary history, psychology, philosophy, and theology, and argue at the time of the delicate constructing of a European unity for an authentic dialogue between France and Germany, because the mysterious hatred between these two countries has been the alpha and omega of Europe. In our discussions, we constantly point out that relationship resides at the heart of reciprocity, and that reconciliation reveals the negative meaning that war gives to relationship. These are the sign of the times, that the future can be deciphered from the present. The prophet, like the strategist, has been responsible to know how to read the clues to the future. However, violence is a terrible adversary, especially since it always wins. Desiring war, which Clausewitz says is the typical attitude of the defender against those who desire peace. In other words, desiring lies and domination can thus become a spiritual attitude. Does not Christ himself invite us to become more cunning like the serpent? We are thus more at war than ever, at a time when war itself no longer exists. We have to fight a violence that can no longer be controlled or mastered. Yet, what if triumph were not the most important thing? What if it were the battle that were worth more than the victory? The primacy of victory is the triumph of the weak. The primacy of the battle, by contrast, is the prelude to the only conversion that matters. This is the heroic attitude that we have sought to redefine. It alone can link violence and reconciliation, or more precisely, make tangible both the possibility of the end of the world and reconciling among all nations, all